おやおやおや、お帰りなさい、ダーリング。ご飯を食べる？お風呂にする？それとも、僕のDevlog 7番? For my fellow baka-ass gaijins out there, welcome to Devlog number 7. This devlog covers the week following Easter, recall the buffer episode in Spolog, and I'll be 100% honest. I did a lot of traveling both during and after the holiday. I did what I could on my laptop, but I recorded absolutely zero footage, so there's going to be a lot of retrospective footage. Last week I admitted to you my deep desire for a PSX aesthetic, and looking at the current humanoid base mesh, guess what? It's a little too high poly for that. And I just can't have that. Otherwise, some gullible people are gonna think I'm talented, which is just not true. So Bamboo, I once again re-extruded the cube, but this time with less faces. I had a little trouble with the shoulder and neck topology because, again, I was trying to limit the number of faces used, but I begged and received guidance from handsome, smart, and intelligent strangers on the internet. After that, I proceeded to lovingly bully him, deservedly so. Next, I had to actually finish the majority of the level design, as my very attentive viewers with memories like elephants, along with some other things like elephants if you know what I mean, will recall there was a big open space in the middle of the level, and my amateur opinion is that empty space is not fun. Had to fill up that hole. So, using my new friend UE4's BSP tools, I slapped in a bunch of geometry. Gameplay wise, I want this level to ease unfamiliar players into wall running by throwing them in the deep end. After all, that's how I learned how to swim, and I turned out just fine. World building wise, this is going to be a quarry. A quarry with giant arms holding up a tower above it. Did the old export static mesh to FBX, brought that bad boy into Blender, and oh god, look at all that geometry. It honestly took me a day to just clean everything up, but if it's fun, it's worth it. Next up, terrain work. Going back to me being a lazy sob, I decided to figure out a workflow to make things easier. I could 1. Paint the terrain entirely by hand using Blender, too much work for me. 2a. Tile one texture across the entire terrain. And 2b. Use triplanar mapping to tile multiple textures across the entire terrain, both of which are just too lazy, even for me. And 3. Blend multiple textures to create a nice looking terrain. Yes, now I just needed multiple textures, and unbeknownst to you, I've been collecting textures, and even making a few. Look at this nice marble texture, made it in Krita. It tiles perfectly. Now look at it shrunk down to a 256 by 256 square. Crispy. Nearest neighbors, baby. Aside from making my own, I also legally got the majority of them from sites like Polyhaven and Textures.com. Check the description for links. These offer great quality PBR textures that you can use royalty-free. A great use of existing textures is that you can change them in cool ways. I also used Blender, yet again, as a way to remix textures I downloaded into cool new ones. Check this out. I took a gold texture, some rocks, and a wall to turn it into a rough rock face with a gold nugget vein in it. Just set up an orthographic camera, render it out, and bam, new texture. Just make sure to set up the color management so the view transform uses standard instead of filmic, and if you're rendering normals, use raw. Of course, for most textures, you don't have to bust out the big guns. You can always make do with simple hue saturation value adjustments or RGB curve changes in any old image editor. Now, how to blend all these textures? I could be a simple man and use vertex colors to linearly interpolate them, but I saw 2 problems with that. First off, if I used vertex colors, I'd have to add more verts for more details. But I could also do it in editor instead of in an external application, which is fine, I guess, but I felt that I could do something else. Hopefully something easier. Second, linear interpolation is good. It's solid, but it's not sexy. I've got all these great free PBR materials, so I might as well put them to good use. So, to address these, I decided to 1. Use a second UV map to blend the textures instead of vertex colors, and 2. Blend the textures based on their height maps. Unreal can 100% handle multiple UVs, or as it calls it in editor, text chords. Here's a little insider baseball, but it bakes its lighting to a separate text chord. All modern game engines should be able to handle multiple UVs. I know for a fact that Unity can as well. After that, height map blending. Just like rigging tutorials, there are hundreds of resources on how to set this up. The only hard part for me was I wanted to blend 4 textures using black, red, green, and blue. It took some time to figure it out, but I got it set up. Now the real advantage of using a fat 4K texture to blend small 256 textures is that I can texture paint inside of Blender, which allows me to see the changes immediately. Then I just have to re-import the big 4K texture in UE4, which is just a few clicks, and the changes get applied immediately. And honestly, this is a good enough workflow for me. UE4 doesn't perfectly recreate what I see in Blender, but say it with me this time, good enough. And that's it for this week. I appreciate your time watching this sucker, and I hope you all have a good day. If you liked the video, hey, why not do the thingy with the thingy? And if you want to follow my game's development, consider subscribing. No one's done it yet, but also if you've got something to say, the comment section is wide open and I will respond. I'm on Twitter as well. You can follow me at dev_natsu. I tweet the weekly bread I make early on there. Link to that is in the description. And with that out of the way, let's get to the bread. So, as I said at the start of this thing, there was a lot of traveling this week, and you can tell by the countertop and the cutting board that I'm not in my usual kitchen. However, that doesn't stop me from breaking bread, not at all. This is my last go at ciabatta for a while, and I decided to up the hydration up to, I'm at least 80% here, and you can tell if you compare this crumb with some of the previous ones it's really airy, much more airy than the last batch, so it came out really good. And again, different kitchen that I'm used to. The oven's different, runs a little hot, as you can tell. We'll say it's got a little toasted, but it tastes delicious. And if we take a look at the other pick, we just zoom in on that crumb structure. It came out really well, and I was pretty pleased with it. Everything turned out great. And again, I have a sourdough starter, use that as the biga, and the yeast in the air, I say it as a joke, but the yeast in the air is free. It's easy. There's instructions for everything on the internet. So you should make your own bread. It's great. It's delicious. It's a lot less work than you'd expect. In fact, there are a lot of no-knead recipes. I don't use them, but there are some. And you should make your own bread. It's great. It's good for you. Make your own bread.